Have you ever noticed how the loudest moments in life often hide the quietest truths? The meetings end, the screens go dark, and suddenly there's a silence no achievement seems able to fill. What if the one thing everyone was waiting to hear was never meant to be spoken loudly at all? Night settles differently when you've spent years building noise around yourself. The city glows below, endless windows, moving headlights, distant sirens softened by glass. Somewhere high above it all, a man sits alone, not working, not celebrating, just watching. The world imagines people like him surrounded by constant motion. Rockets launching, ideas racing, deadlines stacking endlessly. But the reality, at least tonight, feels slower. Almost still, a desk lamp hums softly. Papers remain untouched. A half-finished cup of coffee has gone cold hours ago. Outside, clouds drift past the skyline like slow thoughts refusing to land. For years, he had been known as someone who moved faster than doubt itself. Decisions made quickly, risks taken before fear could catch up. The world admired speed, the ability to act before hesitation appeared. But speed has a cost no one sees. Because eventually, motion stops revealing answers, and silence starts asking questions. He leans back, staring at reflections in the glass, not the city, but fragments of himself layered over it. Success looks different when no one else is watching. It feels quieter than expected, almost unfinished. There was a time when attention felt energizing. Cameras flashing, headlines forming narratives larger than reality. People believing they understood him simply because they recognized his name, but recognition is not the same as being known, and somewhere along the way, he realized something unsettling. The more visible he became, the less space he had to hear his own thoughts. The room tonight feels intentionally empty. No assistants, no notifications, just the faint ticking of a clock, steady, patient, indifferent to ambition. He had avoided this silence for years, not consciously, just naturally. Work filled every gap before reflection could arrive, until recently, because lately, one question kept returning, quietly but persistently, not about success, not about legacy, not even about failure. It was about a name the world had speculated about endlessly, a name whispered across interviews, discussions, and late-night conversations among strangers who believed they were waiting for a revelation. He never confirmed anything, never denied it either. At first, silence felt strategic. Then it became protective, and eventually necessary, because some truths change when spoken too early. The night deepens. Lights across the city begin turning off one by one, like thoughts settling into rest. He watches this rhythm carefully. People choosing sleep over striving, presence over performance. And for the first time in years, he wonders whether the world misunderstood what he had been building all along. Maybe it was never about machines or innovation. Maybe those were only distractions from a more personal search. Search for someone who saw beyond momentum. Someone who wasn't impressed by acceleration, but by stillness. The realization arrives slowly, almost reluctantly. The name everyone expected him to reveal was never meant to shock the world. It was meant to explain a silence. He closes his eyes briefly, as if replaying a memory that refuses to fade, a conversation unfinished. A moment paused at exactly the wrong time, and that's when the tension begins to surface. Because breaking silence doesn't just reveal truth, it changes the story people thought they understood. And tonight, for the first time, he is considering saying it aloud. Not for headlines, not for validation, but because keeping it hidden may have cost more than revealing it ever could. Outside, dawn is still hours away. The city breathes slowly beneath him, unaware that somewhere above, a decision is forming, one that has nothing to do with ambition and everything to do with timing. The question is no longer whether he will speak. It's why he waited this long. And what happened the last time he almost did? The memory didn't arrive all at once. It surfaced the way certain songs do, quietly, without permission, carrying a feeling before a clear image. He opens his eyes again. The city unchanged, yet something inside him shifting. Nights like this used to belong to planning, whiteboards filled with diagrams, endless problem solving, forward motion at all costs. But tonight, his thoughts moved backward, years earlier. Long before the silence became noticeable, life felt simpler in ways success never improved. Not easier, just clearer. There were fewer expectations, fewer eyes watching every decision. Conversations lasted longer then. People listened without trying to interpret meaning behind every word. He remembers walking through an empty parking lot after a late meeting, streetlights buzzing overhead, cold air sharp enough to slow his breathing. That was when he first heard the name spoken differently, not as admiration, not as curiosity, but as understanding. It caught him off guard because most people spoke to him. Very few spoke through the noise surrounding him. The moment seemed ordinary at the time. A short conversation. No grand declarations. Just pauses that felt comfortable instead of awkward. The kind of silence where nothing needed to be proven. For someone used to constant momentum, stillness felt unfamiliar, almost suspicious, and that became the challenge. He didn't know how to exist inside moments that asked for nothing in return. Achievement had always been measurable, progress visible, but connection? That moved at a pace no schedule could accelerate. He tried to treat it like everything else, optimize time, balance priorities, keep moving forward. Yet something resisted structure. Every attempt to control it made it feel more distant, work expanded, responsibilities multiplied. The world demanded attention louder than quiet conversations ever could. So he chose motion, not because he didn't care. But because motion was familiar, the distance grew slowly, almost invisibly. Messages delayed, meetings postponed, intentions replaced by obligations. And eventually silence formed, not dramatic, not angry, just unresolved. At first, he believed time would wait. It rarely does. One evening, months later, he realized he couldn't remember the last real conversation they'd had. Not the practical kind, the meaningful kind. The kind where minutes disappear unnoticed. That realization didn't arrive as regret. It arrived as confusion. How could something important fade without a clear ending? He searched for a moment where everything changed, a mistake, an argument, a definitive turning point. But there wasn't one. Just small absences stacking, quietly until presence disappeared altogether. That was the twist he hadn't expected. The world teaches people to watch for dramatic losses, loud endings, clear failures. But the most significant shifts often happen gently, almost politely, until they become permanent. And suddenly, success felt strangely incomplete. Not empty, he never saw life that way, but misaligned. Like solving complex problems while ignoring a simple question. Waiting patiently in the background, he began noticing it everywhere. Crowded rooms that felt distant. Celebrations that ended too quickly. Achievements that brought satisfaction but not rest. Each milestone followed by the same quiet, returned a thought. He wondered whether silence had become easier than vulnerability, because speaking, the name would mean acknowledging something unfinished. Something human, something that couldn't be redesigned or engineered into certainty, and for someone who built solutions for impossible problems, uncertainty felt unfamiliar territory. Back in the present, the clock moves past midnight. The city is quieter now. Even the traffic has thinned, leaving long empty streets glowing under amber lights. He realizes the world has been waiting for a revelation they imagine is bold or shocking. But the truth forming in his mind feels softer than anyone would expect. The name carries no spectacle, no dramatic confession, only meaning, and meaning is heavier than headlines. He stands and walks toward the window, watching his reflection merge with the fading lights below. For the first time, he admits something silently to himself. He didn't stay quiet because he forgot. He stayed quiet because he wasn't ready to understand what the name truly represented. But tonight, another realization begins to surface, one that changes everything he believed about that unfinished chapter, because the last message he received was never actually the end. And what he discovers next forces him to question Whether silence was ever mutual at all, there's a particular kind of quiet that arrives just before understanding. Not peace, not tension, just a pause, as if life itself is waiting to see whether you're finally ready to notice something that was always there. He remains by the window, hands resting lightly against the cool glass. Below, the city has almost surrendered to sleep. A few taxis glide through empty intersections. Office towers stand dark, their reflections stretching across the river like unfinished thoughts. For years, he believed silence meant distance. That assumption felt logical. When messages stop, when conversations fade, when presence disappears, the mind fills gaps with conclusions. People move on. Stories end. Life redirects itself, but memory has its own timing. Earlier that evening, while sorting through old files, not searching for anything specific, he found it. A message buried beneath years of notifications and forgotten updates. No dramatic words. No accusation. Just a simple note sent late at night. Short, calm, almost patient. He had seen it before. He was certain of that. But at the time, it arrived during chaos, deadlines, travel, decisions demanding immediate attention. He told himself he would respond later. When things slowed down, things never slowed down. Now, reading it again, something feels different. The message wasn't asking for an answer. It wasn't demanding explanation. It simply acknowledged understanding. And left space. Space he never stepped into. The realization lands gently but firmly. Silence had not been rejection. It had been openness, and suddenly, years of assumptions rearranged themselves. He exhales slowly. The kind of breath that carries both relief and regret, not sharp regret, but the quiet awareness of missed timing. The understanding that some moments don't disappear because they lacked importance, but because life moved faster than emotional courage. He walks back toward the desk, the soft lamp casting long shadows behind him. The room feels smaller now, more personal, less like a workspace, more like a place where honesty can exist without performance. The challenge shifts inward. For someone accustomed to solving external problems, this one has no blueprint, no predictable outcome. Speaking the name means accepting uncertainty, how it will be received, whether it still matters, whether time has changed its meaning entirely. He sits down, staring at the blank screen in front of him. The world expects confidence from people like him, certainty, direction, answers delivered without hesitation. Yet here he is, hesitating over something profoundly simple, a name not powerful because of fame, not significant because of public curiosity, but because it represents who he was before constant motion. Reshaped his life. He realizes something unexpected. All these years, he believed success required sacrifice, sleep, comfort, predictability. But no one warned him that sometimes the sacrifice becomes invisible until much later, when silence finally gives it shape. And then comes the twist he never anticipated. The name isn't only about another person. It's about a version of himself that existed in quieter moments. A version that listened more carefully, that didn't measure worth through productivity, that allowed pauses without guilt. Speaking. The name means reconnecting with that part of himself and admitting he may have outgrown certain ambitions while longing for simpler truths. The clock reads 2:17 a.m. Imagines how the world would react if he finally said it. Speculation turning into certainty. Narratives forming instantly. People believing they understood the story, but they wouldn't because the real meaning isn't public at all. It's private acceptance. He understands now why he waited. Not out of fear of judgment, but fear of clarity. Once spoken, the silence would end. And endings, even gentle ones, require courage. Outside, the first faint hint of dawn begins softening the horizon. Darkness loosens its grip, revealing shapes previously hidden. The timing feels symbolic, almost too precise to ignore. He reaches for the keyboard, then pauses. A new question emerges, quieter but deeper than before. What if breaking silence isn't about revealing a name to the world, but about finally saying it to himself? The thought settles heavily, yet peacefully, because for the first time, He understands that closure was never waiting for an answer from someone else. It was waiting for honesty. And just as he begins to type, another memory surfaces, one detail he had overlooked completely. A detail that changes what the name truly means, and why this moment may not be an ending at all. Morning approaches quietly. The sky shifts from deep blue to a fragile gray, the kind of light that feels unfinished, neither night nor day. The city begins waking below, unaware that somewhere above, a decision long delayed is finally settling into place. He watches the horizon instead of the screen now, for years. He believed clarity would arrive like a breakthrough, sudden, undeniable, dramatic. That's how problems were solved in his world. Pressure, effort, then resolution. But this clarity feels different. It arrives gently. Almost kindly. The memory that surfaced moments ago refuses to leave. Not a conversation. Not a grand moment. Just a small detail from long ago, something he barely noticed at the time, during their last meeting. As they stood preparing to leave, there had been no attempt to hold him back. No request for promises. Only a quiet sentence spoken casually, almost as reassurance, not goodbye. Just take your time. At the time, he interpreted it as distance. Acceptance of an ending. Now he understands the twist. It was never an ending. It was permission. Permission to grow, to fail, to become someone else before understanding what truly mattered. And suddenly, the weight he carried for years begins to change shape. The name everyone imagined as a secret revelation was never meant to belong to public. Curiosity. It wasn't a confession designed for headlines or speculation. It was a reminder. Reminder that some people enter your life not to stay forever, but to show you who you are beneath ambition. He sits quietly, letting that realization settle fully. The need to explain disappears. The pressure to announce fades. Even the urgency to send a message softens, because breaking silence, he realizes, doesn't always mean speaking outward. Sometimes it means ending the argument you've been having with yourself. The screen in front of him glows softly. The cursor blinks, patient, neutral, waiting. For the first time, he doesn't feel rushed to fill the space. He types the name, not dramatically, not ceremonially. Just once, he reads it back slowly, and instead of tension, there is recognition. A calm understanding that the meaning was never about reunion or regret. It was about gratitude for a moment in life when he was seen without expectation. He doesn't send anything. He doesn't need to. The silence breaks internally. And that changes everything outside. Sunlight finally touches the tops of buildings, spreading warmth across glass and steel. Morning traffic begins again. People returning to routines, chasing goals, solving problems. Life continues exactly as before, yet something subtle has shifted. He feels lighter. Not because the past changed, but because he stopped resisting it. The name becomes less of a mystery and more of a quiet anchor, proof that even in lives defined by motion, stillness leaves the deepest imprint. And that is the truth no one expected. The world waited for a revelation about who the name belonged to, but the real story was always about why it mattered. He closes the laptop gently. No announcement, no spectacle, just a private moment completed at last. Some silences are not meant to be broken publicly, they are meant to be understood. The city is fully awake now. Morning light fills the room, erasing shadows that once felt permanent. He steps away from the desk, leaving the quiet behind, not as avoidance, but as closure. And maybe that's the part most people never realize. The answers we wait years to hear are often the ones we already know, waiting for us to slow down enough to listen. So tonight, when the noise around you finally fades, when the world stops asking you to perform, you might notice a name, a memory, or a feeling you've kept quietly stored away, not demanding attention, just waiting for acknowledgement. If that moment comes, don't rush past it, stay there a little longer. And if this story felt familiar, there's another one waiting, a reflection about why some people enter our lives exactly when we're not ready for them, and why understanding often arrives years later. You may want to listen to that next. Not for answers, but for the parts of yourself still unfolding in silence.